What do you do when every instinct in your body is screaming at you about someone, but you can't quite prove why? Welcome back to Karma Quietly Whispers, my loves. This is your place for spooky, creepy, and scary stories. My name is Elara, and I am your whisperer. Tonight, please join me as we journey together. I'm sure you will enjoy what is to come. So, let us begin. What do you do when the stories don't match up? When there's a dead child and conflicting accounts of how she died, and CPS removing her sibling, and a woman who keeps sniffing your 4-year-old sister's hair? Settle in, because this one is the kind of story that doesn't resolve cleanly. It sits with you, it asks you hard questions, and it might make you look a little differently at someone in your own life. This comes from r/LetsNotMeet, shared by someone who is trying to make sense of a situation that, the more they examine it, the less sense it makes. And that uncertainty is exactly what makes it so deeply unsettling. Let's begin. The narrator of this story, let's call her Eli, didn't choose this situation. Her mother was essentially pressured into a friendship with a woman we'll call Diane. Diane has an adult son, and somehow, through the tangled social fabric of their community, Eli ended up becoming friendly with the son as well. On the surface, a perfectly normal arrangement. But from the very first day Diane met Eli's mother, something was off. On that first day, the very first time they spoke, Diane immediately opened up about her granddaughter. The little girl had died 9 months prior. Her son, Diane said, had found the child dead in her bed. The cause of death, Diane told them, was SIDS. Now, I want to stop here for a moment because Eli caught something important. SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, affects infants. Babies typically under 1 year old, almost always under 2. Diane's granddaughter was around 4 years old. At 4, SIDS is not a diagnosis that applies. What could theoretically apply is SUDC, sudden unexplained death in children, which is extraordinarily rare and genuinely mysterious. But it is not SIDS. Why does that matter? Because grief distorts memory. People misremember, misname things, confuse terminology when they're shattered. That's real, and that's human. But it is a discrepancy, and discrepancies, loves, are breadcrumbs. Diane quickly became very attached to Eli's family. Clingy, Eli describes her, constantly inserting herself into plans, expressing envy of Eli's mother in ways that felt loaded, heavy with something unspoken. And then there was the way she treated Eli's little sister. The girl is 4 years old, the same age as Diane's deceased granddaughter. Diane complimented her constantly, compared her to the dead child over and over in conversations that became increasingly uncomfortable. And once she sniffed the little girl's hair. Eli's mother's instincts fired immediately. She told Eli, "Something in me is saying to keep my family away from her." And Eli, to her credit, tried to be fair. Diane is neurodivergent. Grief does strange things. Social cues are hard for some people. All of that is true. All of that is worth considering. But empathy and safety are not opposites. You can feel compassion for someone and still protect your child from them. Both things can be true at once. Then came the conversation that changed everything. Eli was sitting with Diane's son. Let's call him Marcus. He was showing her photos on his phone. Family pictures from back in Utah, and he came across a photo of his niece, his daughter, the child who had died. At this point, Marcus didn't know that Eli already knew about the death. Eli played along, let him share it in his own way, and he did. He said his niece had died, that everything had fallen apart after that he struggled with it every day. And then he said something that stopped Eli cold. He said, "I found her dead in the bathtub, not in bed." His mother, Diane, had told Eli's family that her son found the child dead in her bed, lying upside down. That was the story. That was the detail Eli's mother had been given from the very first conversation. But Marcus said the bathtub. 2 accounts, same person found, same family. Completely different locations. Now, I'm not here to convict anyone. I want to be clear about that. Memory is imperfect, especially around trauma. A grieving grandmother and a grieving father might remember differently, might have been told different things by first responders, might be processing in ways that produce inconsistency. But then there's the other context Eli gives us. Diane grew up in what she described as a Mormon-aligned cult. She moved from Utah to Oregon because she was, in her words, running from someone. She wouldn't say who. She also mentioned that after the granddaughter's death, CPS became involved, and the other child, the grandson, was removed from the family. CPS does not remove living children because of SIDS. SIDS is a tragedy no one can prevent or control. There's no negligence in SIDS. There's no intervention triggered by SIDS. But if a 4-year-old child died in a bathtub, that raises questions about supervision, about what was happening in that home, about whether the removal of her brother was a response to something far more troubling than a mysterious, natural death. Eli asks the question directly. Why would CPS remove the surviving child if the death was truly unexplained? I don't have the answer, and I want to be careful not to fabricate one. But I will say this, that question deserves an answer. And the fact that Diane is now in a new state, in a new community, forming intense attachments to a family with a 4-year-old girl the same age as her dead granddaughter, that is not something to dismiss. Eli and her mother are not overreacting. I want to say that plainly. The instinct to protect a child from someone whose story doesn't add up, especially when that person has already lost a child under unclear circumstances and is now unusually fixated on yours. That instinct is not paranoia, that is wisdom. There is a particular kind of danger that comes dressed in grief. It asks for compassion, it asks for patience, it makes you feel cruel for pulling away, and sometimes it genuinely deserves that compassion, that patience. But when the stories don't line up, when there's a dead child and a removed sibling and a woman who sniffs a 4-year-old's hair while comparing her to the dead one, you don't owe comfort to this feeling that something is wrong. You owe protection to the child. Trust the stories that don't add up, not just the ones that are obviously broken, but the small fractures, the details that quietly contradict each other. Those fractures exist for a reason. If your gut is speaking this clearly, listen. I hope Eli's family stays safe. I hope that little girl stays safe. Thank you for joining me tonight. My name is Elara, and I am your whisperer. I'll be here, waiting for you next time. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below. I want to hear your stories. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more. This has been Karma Quietly Whispers. See you soon.